Okay, I'm going to try to get caught up on some of this center section stuff with video rather than boring you with the still pictures and narrations. So this is where I am currently at with my center section. It is for the most part assembled completely, and as you can see, I've got the wing attaching brackets in place. I've got the pulleys for the ailerons in place. Of course, I've got the cutouts, and it's all shaped. The center section is varnished. It has a coat of varnish on it, except for the plywood floor. I just put the plywood floor in yesterday. So a couple of things that got me to this point. One thing that became clear was that once I got the general assembly of the center section finished, that I wanted to put the floor on. Once the floor is in place, then I can cut away this center rib. Once the center rib is out of the way, I can work on making the cover. However, in order to put the floor on, I needed to have my metal wing attach brackets permanently in place. Once the floor is on, those brackets will not come out. In order to have the brackets permanently attached, obviously they have to exist, so I had to make those. And I also had to varnish at least the areas where they attach, because you don't want the wood behind the brackets, just plain wood. You want some varnish on that wood. So kind of working backwards from there, I had to make my brackets. I had to get them fitted to the cabanes temporarily on the fuselage to make sure everything fit, and get them painted and welded and have them completely made. Then I had to varnish. I chose to varnish the whole center section so that these can be attached, and then I went ahead and put the floor on. Now, a couple of things that I want to point out, and there'll be pictures accompanying this. In order to attach this plywood floor, it needs something to attach to around the whole perimeter of the center section, and as well as the center here. So I added this. See, it figures it'd be right in the shadow. That's pretty impressive. I added this strip of plywood onto this plywood piece here, this strip here, and this strip here, for this plywood to attach to from underneath. This floor plywood attaches to these pieces along the back, along this back edge. Of course, they attach to the ribs on the sides. And I had to add, since the spar sits on top of this piece of cap strip, I had to add a piece of cap strip underneath, which you can see here, to make up this distance, to keep the plywood on the same plane here and along the front spar. Of course, I had to do the same thing on the rear spar. Again, the rear spar sits on top of this cap strip, so I had to add cap strip underneath it to keep everything on the same plane. And then, I don't know if this will show it at all or not, in front of the nose section, or in the nose, the leading edge, here's another one of those plywood strips that I glued to my leading edge plywood, and then the floor plywood comes up to it. It actually lays on top of this as well and gets glued, gets epoxied. So I had to add some fillers to get the floor plywood all on the same plane and get it attached around the whole perimeter. And then as far as the top goes, I added, again, let me see if I can get this. The spar, you can see how the wood is two different looks here. This is the spar here. This piece and this piece were added to make up the gap needed for the top to sit here. The rib comes across and the spar sits within the rib, and then this piece, these two pieces had to be added to take up this space so that the top can sit on here. Now I don't have it in place at the moment, but I'm going to have piano hinge here. That's what the holes are for, with the T-nuts. And again, I'll have pictures, but the hinge is here. The top will attach to that and go back. This gap is left here. The fabric will come up and wrap around here. And if I ever need to get to these fittings and these bolts, I can just cut through the fabric. So that's the idea for having these access holes handy and be covered with fabric. But again, if I need to get in here for the bolts or to get to the brackets, I can just put a hole in the fabric. And then I added a couple of filler strips. There's a filler strip here and a filler strip across here to keep everything on the same plane, even with the leading edge plywood and these plywood strips. So all of this is level. And then the cover will go from here back. So that's kind of where I'm at now. I'm going to start to cut away this rib. Of course, the floor is epoxy to this bottom piece, so everything's going to get cut off from here up. This rib piece, cap strip piece here will stay in place. And since it's all epoxied around the perimeter, it should stay pinned really nice, and I don't think this is going to go anywhere. I know a few people have done it this way, and they've cut out the meat part of the center rib so they can use this for storage, and that's what I'm getting ready to do now. This back piece here is going to stay because this is a good support for the spar, and it's the same in the front. This front nose piece of the center rib stays to support this spar, so it's just going to be this center section here that's going to be removed. So let me do that, and then I can come back and do a little bit more of an overview. Here you can see the center rib of the center section has been removed. I decided to leave these gussets in the corners to help tie this vertical piece into the bottom as well as into this top piece of the rib. I figured if I were to cut this up through here and remove this, there wouldn't be enough support here really for this vertical, so I just felt better leaving this nub and having this all tied together with the gussets to give this some support for the spar. Here you can see where I had cut flush or almost flush the pieces, the vertical pieces that come down. Those have been cut off, and you can see the saw marks here. So obviously this is plain bare wood that has no varnish on it. So when I varnish the bottom, I'll go ahead and touch up these areas here, these areas here as well. And on the back I did the same thing. I left this gusseted piece in place to tie this vertical into this piece here. I just left those intact to give this some more support. And then I've got a piece of plywood that's being epoxied in place here to keep the area that the lid actually closes up against all on the same plane. So I had to add this 16th inch piece of plywood on top. Now what I did was, I've been fitting the top, and you can see where I stopped short here. The reason I stopped short is because of this. Here is my top piece with the hinges and a center rib that's contoured exactly like the rib itself, to help keep this some kind of a curved shape that will fit the center section really nice. And this also adds support when this lid is in place on the center section. This rib here prevents it from sinking in the middle because this is just 16th inch plywood. So here, this is just a piece of 16th inch plywood. It's a reinforcement piece that I've glued onto the underside of my center section lid. This, I'm planning on using a particular type of latch to latch the this back end of the top down, and I thought it would be a good idea to have a little extra meat, so to speak, back here for that to attach to. And this also acts a little bit as a stiffener to keep the thin 16th inch plywood top from bowing and bending and stuff like that. So this actually serves two purposes. So with it attached with the hinges on this end, you've got this center rib here for support, and with this reinforcement in the back, and then eventually there'll be two latches back here to latch the cover shut. It's very, very lightweight, but I think it will be more than adequate for just a top. So this piece here has a setback from this edge to this edge, and it's that gap that I left right here. So that reinforcement piece then will sit right across through here, and then this, and the rest of it up here will all be on the same plane. So I don't know if I have video of it or not, but I've got pictures of the lid in place with the hinges screwed on here, and it lays here. It lays across the top of this, and the top here. It will rest on this, and it will rest here, and then along this edge here. And then it will be, I'll have a latching mechanism here and here. So once I got that all done and figured out, I realized that this is going to make good storage for small items, and I figured I needed some kind of a barrier here to protect the pulleys and the cables, because you don't want to put anything in your center section and have it move around and get wedged up into your aileron cables and your aileron pulleys in flight. That would be a bad thing. So what I've made up is I just made up another piece of 16th inch plywood, and you can see the notches in the center. And that piece is basically going to span across this entire width here. And the notches are to clear the cap strip on the bottom here and this top one here. And it just spans across, and it will cover up. It's like a fake wall, if you will. It will protect the pulleys and the cables. And then the blocks that you see here and this one, there's one in the center, and then of course one on this side and one here. These are going to have Velcro put on the faces of all of them, and that piece will just be, oh yeah, that's nice. That piece will just be Velcroed then into place. And whenever I need to get it at these pulleys and cables, I can just pull that back and lay it down in here out of the way and inspect whatever it is I need to inspect. Now what I could have done, I almost made this mistake, I was originally going to put these blocks over here in the corners, but then I realized if I put the blocks here, that's going to obstruct getting to this nut and possibly this nut. So I just went ahead and moved them down completely out of the way. If I ever need to take the pulley off, the pulley bracket, these different nuts, I can do that and this block won't be in the way. So if you put that protective barrier here, make sure you keep your blocks out of the way enough that you can get to whatever you need to get to here. So that's where I'm at, and it's coming along well. I'm not really sure what else is left to do other than after these little components are figured out and finally in place, they all need to be varnished as well. This bottom still needs varnish, the various little blocks, that barrier wall, and then the top lid, both top and bottom of that lid's got to be varnished. Other than that, I don't know if there's anything really left to do, but if there is, I'll get it on video, or at least get pictures of it. Hey everybody, just wanted to say real quick again, thanks for checking out my YouTube videos, and just a couple of real quick tidbits before you leave. If you'd be so kind as to check out my Gofundme page, the link is down in the description of these videos. For those of you who find it in your heart to donate for this new cause of mine, I've got another project going on, and there's some really cool things I'd like to do with this aircraft, and again, that's all explained in my GoFundMe. But if you find moved enough to go do that and donate, I've got this horizontal stabilizer skin, and donors will get their name put on this skin, and ultimately when this gets filled and the aircraft gets finished, this is going to be hung up on the wall of honor in my hangar. Just a little bit of recognition for those donors who helped make the project a reality. Another thing too is, I'm sure you've noticed that even this video that I'm making right now is of the same or worse quality than the video that you just watched, and that's because, believe it or not, this camera is the exact same camera that I filmed the original hint videos with. So I just wanted to point that out. I'm not really sure why, but I know the video quality lacks, but hopefully the information within is worth something. And the other thing that I want to mention real quick is, again, these are little snippets from my hint video DVDs, so a lot of these individual clips just kind of come to an abrupt end. That's just the way it is when I'm trying to rip these DVDs apart and re-edit them into small little segments, and they just kind of end weird at times. But that's it. That's all I wanted to say. And again, thanks, and I hope you'll come back, check out my channel, and see if there are any new videos and updates. All right, I'll talk to you then. See you.